Hi everybody, it's Professor Michalsen. Today we're going to be talking about theories of gender and crime for our gender and crime seminar. Most of you probably should have taken criminology at this point, since you're in a 400 level seminar. So I'd like you to sort of go back to that class and think about all of the different theories that you learned about in criminology. Some of you may have taken it with me or somebody else. But think about all the different theories that you discussed in those classes. Classical criminology, classical and neoclassical criminologies, which talk about questions of choice, that people have free will and make their choices, and therefore neoclassical and classical criminologies have real implications for punishment. That if we put in place the right laws, people will think about their actions in a way that makes them choose not to commit crimes. Other types of criminological theories are positivist theories, which mostly speak about how crime is determined biologically, for example, that we have sort of perhaps a genetic component to why we commit crimes, and therefore people are not making choices. It's sort of the complement to, not opposite exactly, but it's very different from classical and neoclassical criminology, saying that we don't have a choice in the matter, but therefore rehabilitation is something that can be useful. There are a number of different sociological explanations for criminal behavior that look at social class or environment. Some theories look at how criminal behavior is learned, or how life course theory, for example, talks about the ways in which turning points in our lives affect whether or not we continue criminal behavior or stop criminal behavior. There are a few, and then let me say one last thing, that there's also critical criminology, theories of criminology that instead of looking at the crime and why does somebody commit a crime, it looks at why laws are created the way that they are, who benefits and who doesn't benefit. So, for example, that people who have power create the laws in their own interest. So that they don't end up being punished for things that they do, but that other people who are powerless or have less power are punished for things that they do to keep them powerless. That the law is not something that we all agree on. It's not a consensus model. Most criminological theories sort of depend on a consensus model, which suggests that we all agree on our laws in all of our best interests, and therefore if we break them, it's our own responsibility. Critical criminology looks at the laws from a sort of conflict perspective, which suggests that power dictates who makes the laws. Some sort of very different ways of looking at our legal system. Now, there's a few, the readings that you did for today looked at gender and criminological theories. Point number one that I'd like to make is that theory, over the sort of history of criminological theory, women have been left out. Theories were based on research on men, and by this point you should know why that is. Mainly, one would suggest that it's because most crime is committed by men. And therefore, researchers either had trouble finding women to do research with, or they didn't think that it was important to include women because women so rarely, relative to men, are engaged in criminal behavior. That's been changing in recent history. So what the articles that you read had to do with how, for example, strain theory, one of my favorites, integrates gender into it these days. Then an article by Jean Flavin up at Fordham, talking about how feminism can be integrated into our criminological methods. And we'll talk a little bit about what feminism is in a few minutes. Messerschmitt is one of the more well-known criminological theorists that talks about masculinities and how our sort of cultural perceptions of what men should be interacts with whether criminal behavior happens in people, and then social control and how social control theory and gender may go together. So let's start first just briefly with a discussion of feminism. It's often quite a dirty word, but I don't think, if you do think it's a dirty word, I don't think it means what you think it means. Overall, feminism means treating women as human beings. It doesn't mean that women should take over the world and kill all the men or anything like that. But there are different types of feminist approaches. Liberal feminism is probably the sort of most mainstream of them. Liberal feminism focuses on equality of men with women. It works within existing structures. It says, we don't want to make any big changes to how society is made up, but that women should have the same opportunities that men do. Radical feminism, on the other hand, focuses more on the idea that male dominance and male control is a problem, and that men have power in such a way that needs to be changed. That men, for example, rape is a weapon of control. Or men having control over women's reproduction or sexuality, that these are the problems, and that this gender inequality needs to be eliminated from our social institutions. Marxist feminism looks at economic inequality, and that sort of as Marxism and the study of capitalism by Marx looked at economics as the core of the issue, that Marxist feminism also looks at that and focuses on how women, for example, may take more responsibility in the home for unpaid labor activities, that women's jobs are low paid, and that therefore the solution to these problems suggested by Marxist feminists is that we have to eliminate economic problems before we can reduce any sort of inequality of women. Third wave feminism, a little more recent, the approach really is, takes, how do I say this? It really looks at, focuses on how race and gender and nationality and socioeconomic status, how all of these things intersect, the study of intersectionalities, to make women's challenges and strengths and different for different types of women. That when feminism sort of started up, it was something that relatively wealthier white women focused on, and that third wave feminism came along and said, hang on a second, those are problems for particular types of women, but that there are other types of women all over the world who have different challenges. The focus really is on the different points of view of different types of women, and so how oppression happens, not just in a gendered way, but also in a race way, an ethnicity way, a nationality way, a socioeconomic way, a sexuality way, and how those different sort of sites of oppression come together in different ways for different people. So we have to understand all of those different perspectives. Now, feminist criminology focuses on a whole bunch of different things, as you might imagine. Feminist criminology looks at whether or not our existing theories can apply to women at all. Maybe they don't work for women. And you'll, in some of the articles that people read for today, for this topic, you'll see that there are some theories that maybe work and some theories that don't. Then also, these basic questions that have been really ignored by theory, which is sort of funny, right? if we're thinking about crime, one of the most obvious things that we can say is that men commit more crimes than women. Men are arrested for crimes more often. They are convicted for crimes more often, incarcerated more often, and by a long shot. And internationally, I mean, there is not a place that we know of in this world where women are in trouble with the law more than men are, and by huge margins. So why wouldn't we study that? We look at age. Certainly age is one of the more studied concepts in criminology. Why, over time, do people stop committing crime? And most people, as they get older, they stop committing crimes. Gender, on the other hand, is not something that was traditionally studied. More and more it is being studied, but why has it been left out? And then lastly, feminist criminology generally focuses on the question of research methodology and how research can be done differently to take into account things like, for example, rejection of the question of objectivity. So feminist methods in general suggest that we can't be objective, that we can pretend that we don't have bias, but in the end, bias exists everywhere. So how do we just own that and build it into our methods? And, for example, including our research subjects in our research so that they can drive what we do. So, let's see, what else did I want to say about that? I guess that's really my sort of introduction to that. What I'd like you to do is, on the discussion boards, I'd like you to focus on what your article said, because not everybody read your article. So sort of give people a summary of what the article said, and then say what you think about it. Why might gender have been excluded before, and why is it, and how is it working now that gender is being included? I think that the question of masculinities is also incredibly important. So how have we ignored the socialization of men so far? Why is it a given that men would commit more crime? I see all over the discussion boards these comments about how, well, men are just that way. Men commit more crimes, men are more aggressive, men are this, men are that. Are you saying that that's biologically true? Pretend that it isn't biologically true, or that there's, a component of it that's not just biological. How do we structure our society, our maleness, right? So how do we expect men to be that encourages criminality? Messerschmitt talks about doing gender. A lot of people talk about how you do gender, how you act as a particular gender. So if you had to act like a man, how did you learn to act like a man? What does that mean? If you had to act like a woman, what does it mean to act like a woman? And how does society put those strictures onto people in such a way that might encourage crime in men, or aggression, or delinquency, and the opposite in women, for example? So I'd like you to think about that. Perhaps even for the discussion boards, pay attention to your behavior for this week and see if there are times when you realize that you're doing your gender, that you're performing your gender in a particular way, so that you are acting in a way that you think you're supposed to act. Actually, there's one last theory that I wanted to talk about too, which is pathways theory. And there's a discussion board up on Blackboard where pathways theory is discussed. Now, pathways theory was developed to react to girls' crime. But I'd actually like to think about whether and how it might apply to boys' crime. Pathways theory suggests that girls are far, far more likely than boys to be abused in the home, which we know to be true, though boys are also abused. Abused in the home means that a girl, for example, might do something to cope with that. So she might run away. She might start doing drugs to deal with the trauma. Doing drugs obviously is criminal behavior. Running away is something called a status offense, which is something that only juveniles can get in trouble for. If I ran away from home, nobody would arrest me because I'm an adult, but a juvenile can get in trouble for that. So therefore, getting into trouble because of survival skills, right? So trying to get away from a bad situation, but you get in trouble, you're criminalized for those survival skills. And that pathway ends up getting more and more in trouble, right? So drugs, somebody might end up doing property crimes in order to support a drug habit, and might end up homeless, might end up certainly not going to school, and so that pathway into property crime, into drug crime, into perhaps other types of crime happens because of sort of this original abuse. Now, again, this was developed for girls, but I'd like you to also think about how pathways theory might also work for boys, whether it does at all, and how that might end up indicating some sort of interventions that we might be able to do with girls either before they leave the home or once they leave, okay? As we continue the rest of the semester, I'd like you to keep these theories in mind. You should be thinking not just about the practical, but also how theories organize our thinking. So, I don't know, grab a newspaper story and see how you think a theory applies or doesn't apply. If it's a story about a female, you know, does a feminist criminological theory work? Or, you know, a theory of masculinities or a pathways theory, does it work? Or what about some more mainstream criminological theories? How do those apply? Do they work for men but not for women? So try to keep your theoretical framework in mind as we go through the rest of this semester, or as you're, you know, just happen to be reading the newspaper or hearing about a particular crime. Theories in general are not supposed to be applied to specific crimes, you know, but I actually think it works quite well to try them out that way and see how they work. All right, so keep working on the discussion boards. Remember to review the syllabus periodically, at least weekly, to make sure that you're up to date on everything you should be reading and assignments that are coming up, okay? Have a great week, and I will see you soon. Take care.